thank you for joining us today. You're listening to Pet EDU, and I'm your host, Mary Obadier. This is Society Bites Radio, social interaction for the mind and soul. I am very thrilled about my guest today. She is called the Pet Safety Crusader. Denise Fleck was raised by a Great Dane and has spent her life loving animals. As dog mom to 11 and cat mom to 1, she has written hundreds of articles for pet publications and is the proud recipient of 4 Maxwell Medallions from the Dog Writers Association, including Best Children's Book, and 2 Muse Awards from the Cat Writers Association, in addition to special awards in various categories. A former studio publicist, Fleck followed her heart by going to the dogs, cats, rabbits, and other species. And after extensive training and practice, developed her own Pet First-Aid and CPR curriculum, as well as a 5-month-long animal care course for high school students. She has personally instructed more than 20,000 pet parents, professional pet sitters, obedience trainers, groomers, and daycare providers, and has reached millions more through her television appearances, including CBS, TV's The Doctors, Animal Planet, and CNN. Denise also has the honor of teaching in the homes of Oprah Winfrey and Kirstie Alley and several Playboy Playmates, other celebrities, and also teaches online and via live conference across the globe. She has authored more than a dozen books and created a line of pet first aid kits and instructional posters. Denise is the president of the Gray Muzzle Organization, which is for senior dogs, and on the board of the Emma Zen Foundation. She has twice been a finalist as Pet Industry's Woman of the Year, the past president of the Volunteers of the Burbank Animal Shelter, and is the recipient of the Burbank Police Department's Volunteer of the Year Award for drafting the city's animal emergency plan. Denise, you are a Wonder Woman.
Well, that's very kind, but thank you so much for having me on the show. It's just positively wonderful to be able to just share my animal messages with others.
Well, I see you and I'm like, why haven't I interviewed this woman before? And I don't know if you remember me or not, but we first met on it was the women, what is that again? The women's...
Women in the pet industry, maybe?
Yes, the women in the pet industry. I had joined that for a while, and I was asking for products from, the pet business ladies out there. And you had sent me some of these nice little pet first aid pocket books.
Right. Yes. I do remember. Yes. Well, I mean, you've been busy, interviewing other people too and doing your thing. So, it comes full circle and we get around to everybody ultimately, but it takes time. There's a lot of us out there doing our thing for the animals. We're all different spokes in the wheel.
Absolutely. I have a lot of people that I can interview because there's a lot of good people out there that care about pets, and we're all out there because of the pets. And I wanted to tell you too, those pocketbooks, I kept 2 of them for myself, and I carry them in my pet sitting bag. And I haven't had to use them yet, thank goodness. But can you still purchase those?
You can. You can get them either through my website or through quickfindbooks.com. And what's cool about them, Mary, is rather than having an index or a table of contents, they just have little tabs on them. So if you want to get to poisoning, or if you want to know how to manage choking, or how to actually do rescue breathing or CPR, you just go to the tab quickly. So they're just, rather than being, a great big encyclopedia of what to do, they're just a quick reference to get you through. Obviously, people really need to learn skills and, kind of be on autopilot when something happens. But we all need that quick reference when, an incident occurs, to just kind of jostle our brain and, give us that moment to collect our thoughts and act appropriately and calmly.
Well, I really like the idea of the tabs, because you're right. When there's an emergency situation, we need to act fast. And so I do like that. Excuse me, I do have a little bit of a cold. I saw that you were a studio publicist for Paramount Pictures, but because of your dog Sunny, you are now doing Pet First Aid. So tell us what happened and what brought you to this.
Certainly. Well, I certainly had a great time doing my thing, having fun with entertainment. But, I did get tired of feeding human egos after a while and wanted to do something that would make a difference. And I certainly want to say, there were some amazing and wonderful people I met in the business. Don't get me wrong. But, we all want to do something that really nourishes our own soul. And as it happened, my yellow lab, Sunny, when she was about 8.5 years old, one morning, she just couldn't get up off the floor. And when she tried, she let out a blood-curdling scream that just seemed to echo through the canyons around our house. Unbeknownst to us at the time, she had actually ruptured 3 discs in our spine. And we found out later it wasn't really an injury. It was, a genetic defect. Like all of us, sometimes things just don't fit right in the body. And after years and years of rubbing, there's a flare-up. Well, it picked that particular morning to flare up. But what made matters worse is this was almost a 100-pound dog, and we lived in basically what was a small cabin in the Hollywood Hills that was literally 110 railroad tie steps from the car to the house up the hill. Wow. So, having almost a 100-pound dog that was conscious and in serious pain, it was a daunting task trying to carry her down. We had developed a really good relationship with our veterinarian, and although he didn't, officially make house calls, he sent a vet tech to our house. We got her on a stretcher, and after surgery, she bounced back to her fun-loving self. But I just never again wanted to be caught unaware when my furry child was in pain. So I just jumped on the bandwagon and started training and learning and reading and taking classes and, starting rescue volunteering and doing hands-on work with animals to learn everything I could so I would be prepared if my child needed me. So that's kind of where it all started.
I'm kind of curious as to what would you have, since first aid now, Pet First Aid, what would you have been able to do to help her in that situation? It sounds like you pretty much did what you could.
We did, but I probably would have learned how to transport her, how to carefully lift her. I would have improvised some sort of backboard and carried her myself rather than, because we were pacing and we wasted a couple hours at home waiting for the vet to open and be able to call them that morning, because it was the incident happened like at 6 or 7 in the morning and they didn't open till 8 or 9. So, we would have probably got her there and been there the moment it opened and actually carried her down ourselves. So that would have probably been the main thing. We would have gotten her there more quickly. Obviously, the surgery she needed couldn't have been a first aid thing, but I would have probably reacted more calmly and actually have been able to do the transport in that way. But then, other things that have happened later on, especially in rescue work. But each of the dogs I've had since have done something to challenge me, whether it was, a broken toenail that bled like crazy. Sunny also had an ear hematoma, which is kind of like labs when they shake their head and they bang them against the wall. Sometimes they'll get like a pocket of blood, just different paw injuries that I've had to bandage, bee stings. My Akita was trying to be a warrior and save the other 2 dogs and grabbed a rattlesnake. So, I've unfortunately had to put too much of my first aid techniques to use over the years.
So it's important for us to know that the Pet First Aid is not a replacement for vet care, but it's a way to keep them alive while you get them there.
Absolutely. It's what you do at the onset of an injury or illness. It hopefully, minimizes further injury, and maybe you can make the pet more comfortable. But the idea is to become a team player with your veterinarian. And, in the worst case scenarios, if they aren't breathing or, their heart has stopped, or even if they're losing a lot of blood, if you can minimize blood loss, if you can prevent them from suffering from heat stroke and prevent the brain from swelling, or in the case of rescue breathing and CPR, if you can be the pump that the heart can't be at that moment in time, you can actually keep that life-giving blood and oxygen circulating so that the veterinarian, you then are delivering a pet that is still viable and alive.
Well, what advice would you give to someone who finds themselves in an emergency situation with a
Well,
pet?
the number one thing, and I mean, and it doesn't matter what type of situation it is, but you need to take a deep breath, count to 10, hug a tree, whatever it happens to be. But you need to be calm because pets are so receptive to our feelings and emotions. They feed off our energy. And people actually get what's called an acute adrenaline dump sometimes. And it can actually, render our mind unable to think and our motor skills unable to work. So it's important you process that adrenaline dump and take that moment, take that deep breath first, because we need to stay calm. And then hopefully, if you have learned skills ahead of time and practice them, you can act effectively. One of my very first students gave me a quote after the class, and it's really, I think, one of the best pieces of advice. And it was something to the effect of, don't wish you had learned pet first aid. It just really is an important thing. And, people can operate off of, human instincts, but dogs and cats are different species. And, some of the techniques are going to differ as well. And also, cats are not little dogs. So they're a different species altogether. So there are some things you need to learn more specifically about cats than you do about dogs as well. So depending on who you share your life with, it's important to really get in tune.
I have taken probably 3 first aid courses, and it's hard for me to remember everything because I've yet to use it, thank goodness. And I've been in pet sitting since 2012. I've taken pets to the vet, but I've never had a real emergency. And so what do you think are the best skills a professional pet sitter could have and brush up on with their pet first aid?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's hard to remember it all. And it's funny, is I don't even know how many hundreds or thousands of classes I've taught over the year. And my husband has sat in on a lot of them just because, sometimes he accompanies me to conferences or different things. And always after every class, he's just amazed at how much information there is. And I'm a big advocate of a quote by Confucius. And to paraphrase it, people forget what they hear, they remember what they see, and they understand what they do. So I feel it's always really important to make my demonstrations count because people are going to remember what they see. And then I think it's also very important to engage them, to make them practice, with a stuffed animal and do different things so that they really will understand it. But the things I think pet sitters are most likely to encounter is, number one, choking and upset stomachs. Every dog and every cat at some point in their time is going to choke on something. They're going to eat something too fast, too much, or something they shouldn't have gotten into, and either choke or have an upset stomach. It's likely they're going to have a hurt paw or a twisted ankle or something along those lines. Bee stings are very likely for an animal that goes outdoors. And, if you're not careful with dogs and you live in a hot climate, a heat injury could also be another incident. I guess if you live in a cold climate, a cold injury could be an incident. And that would also include making sure not that paws don't just get injured, but that things don't get on them like de-icing salts or antifreeze or something along those lines that they would then lick off and ingest, and you would have a poisoning incident.
I know when I walk dogs, I always look for bees, and I always look for, snakes and anything like that. I'll keep them out of the brush, just to, because you never know if there's a snake in there.
Well, no. And I mean, like I mentioned earlier, one of my dogs, got bitten in our own backyard. So, I mean, she survived it. I mean, I had her on the rattlesnake vaccine, which actually was big when I was in California. But now that I've been training more and more people around the country, I'm realizing